Hi. In this video, I want to present briefly, I hope, the outlines of the ethical theory put forward by Saadya Gaon in the 10th and final section of his Emunot B'Dayot, his books of beliefs and opinions, probably considered the first work of Jewish philosophy in the medieval period, and a very unusual, bold, and sometimes controversial thinker. The ethical theory is based on, or is presented anyway, as a set of 13 uh, human, you can call them drives, impulses, faculties, life choices, each of which can be taken to the extreme. And he illustrates each one by having a sort of describing a person who takes it to the extreme. So, for example, the first one, which is called in Arabic Zud, which I would think is close to what we New Englanders called in the days of the Pilgrims frugality. It's doing with as little as possible, but it also has a social dimension of withdrawing from human society because it's just unbearable. And in the extreme case that Saadya portrays, someone is just doesn't want anything to do with people and with life itself, and so just goes off in the woods where there's nothing to eat and no place to sleep, and gets sick and just dies miserably in the forest. And of course, Saadya says this type of extreme behavior is unwarranted, is bad, and recommends moderating the this urge to withdraw and using it only appropriately. And it goes on in this vein with the other 13 what I would call impulses, drives, or life choices. Some of them are clearly identical to what ethical philosophers would call virtues or vices. For instance, there is the love of money, and there is the sexual indulgence. There's also the love of wisdom and the urge to worship God. All of these are in this list of 13, and none of them ought to be carried to the extreme. They all should never take up the entire uh, focus, the entire energies of one's life. Now he calls this ethical essay Kitab Zud Kabir, the book of the great Zud, the great frugality, the great withdrawal. Zud in Hebrew would be called most often prishut, which is again a sort of asceticism of refraining from all but the basic necessities of life and all of the most minimal social contact. And then he has Zud as one of the first quality that he discusses. But that's not enough reason to call the book of the great Zud. What I think lies behind this is that this Zud, this frugality, this ability to withhold, to refrain from something, is applied in all of the cases, all the other 12 cases, as a way of restraining oneself from going to the extreme in each one of these departments. So, for example, greed, or the love of money, is restrained by Zud, and same the love of wisdom. Now, none of these qualities is considered intrinsically bad, and the reason for this is that he has the theological and philosophical basis of this whole theory is that only God is unidirectional, is unified to the extreme, is simple, meaning there's no complexity. There is just the divinity. All created beings are complex. We are made up of different bodily elements, different bodily organs, different senses, and so on. And the same for the entire cosmos. He goes on and says actually that, citing the book of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, which is his scriptural reference point for ethics, at the first verse, where King Solomon says, Havel, Havalim, Amar Kohelet, all is vanity, cannot be taken literally. God created the world. Did he create something which is totally vain, which is totally worthless or useless or without any purpose? No. So what he interprets this verse to mean, Havel, Havalim, Amar Kohelet, Hakol, Havel, that anyone who makes his entire life just the pursuit of one of these goals, whether it's money or wisdom, whether it's worship of God or having many children, that is vain. Because the true human life, just like the true human being, is multiplex. And this is the theological basis of his theory. He then goes on at the very end, after developing this theory, to talk about the mixtures of colors and the mixtures of musical tones leading to harmony, as sort of a way of saying that, that the proper mixture is the correct way, the way to go in life. Now, it's important, I think, in the context of ethical theories that are propounded in Judaism and elsewhere, to make 2 points. First, Saadya has no ideal that people should aspire for. In other words, it's one blanket, one size fits all, one blanket set of ethical principles. These are all things that people need. These are all things should be used judiciously. And these are things when, if you sense or you get feedback that you've gone too far on one of them, then you should apply this ability, the first one he mentions, this one of zud, or frugality or restraint, to calm it down, get yourself back on a more even keel. But speaking of even keels, he has there's nothing to do at all with Maimonides' golden mean, which is not just Maimonides. It has roots in Greek philosophy, and it was adopted by some Islamic philosophers. Doesn't have pairs of virtues and vices. He doesn't think of, say, one human, say, impulse for acquisition, which taken in one extreme leads to greed, and another extreme leads to asceticism, doing with like hardly anything, and one, according to Maimonides and others, one strives for the middle, to have what you need, live comfortably, but not go overboard, and not have this what you're always thinking about, and always going to the computer and buying more and more stuff. So it doesn't have any and also he has no provision for, again, for someone aspiring more. In other words, the good life, which is regulated in his pronouncements throughout this chapter by basically the biblical commandments, restraining your need to acquire things, should be restrained by the biblical prohibitions on stealing or coveting. The appetite for food should be restrained by the biblical injunctions or limitations on what food is permissible and what is not. And this says again, one size fits all is for everyone the same thing, as opposed to many or most of Jewish, Musar books, ethical books, which are written for people who want to go far beyond that, in the sense or in the hope or in the belief that that the more self-restraint and the more control one exercises over oneself, and the more ability one has to direct one's energies in the proper direction, brings one closer to God and closer to the religious ideal. He has none of this here. Even Maimonides, in his Hilchot Deot, which is again written for the general public, at least offers two options of shooting for the exact mean between the two extremes, or tilting slightly in one direction or another in order to accommodate some innate tendency. In other words, since we have a tendency towards uh, pride, he he tells us to have to tilt very far in the direction of modesty. Not Saadya. He has just this blanket theory for all, which is based again on which is argued in the form of presenting these 13 extreme types that you could hardly meet, and he seems to think that the whole school of people who think that there's nothing to the life but eating, nothing to life but having children, and and then regulated again, as I said, by the ethical pronouncements, mainly in Coelet. So I hope you found this somewhat interesting. And if you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to write. Thank you, and see you in the next one.